What? Cricket?
Look at our grass, look at the amount of
Oh, on the demographic page.
over 50%.
Who knew?
One thing to think about too on drivers before we move on is that there's more consciousness about drivers of satisfaction than there is about energy. And that just means we're not seeing anything definitive on energy. We're seeing a couple things, but not a lot. So we'll just keep that in mind. St. Andrews may not have a lot of consciousness about what motivates us as opposed to what satisfies us, what keeps our energy up. And I have some thoughts about that, which we'll talk about in a minute. All right, let's turn to page 6. This is one of my favorite pages because I like these window charts. Also, you're going to like what you see. Yep, let's move up. Sorry. Look where your dot is. Can you see it?
Yes.
Wow.
That's a nice place to have your dot. So what I wrote on my chart after I made all these copies is that you are in the transformational corner. The other 3 corners are chaos, recovery, and static. Okay? Chaos is to your left. High energy and low satisfaction. Lots of enthusiasm and energy, low satisfaction. We're frustrated. There's chaos in our system. In the lower left corner is recovery. Our numbers are bad. You know, we're having a hard time, but we're trying to make our way. And then static. High satisfaction, low energy. Okay? And you've been to churches like that, right? They kind of smell like death. A little bit. There's like a, uh-oh, vibe. You know? And sometimes St. Andrews might be in that place. You know? Where we like it here, but it's not very transformational. It's not, you know, are we really going where God is calling us? I'm a therapist, so I often will think about this in a personal way or in an individualistic way. There are times when I personally am in a transformational place in my life, and then there are times when I'm in those other places, right? And so organizations are not very different than that. This is not new information that you're looking at. This is the same stuff we've been looking at for the last half hour. It's just in a different way of looking at it. It's just visual. Okay? When we feel good about ourselves and we have energy, there's a lot we can do, and the converse is also true. Goal is to head northeast. In the case of St. Andrews, I think your goal is to gain insight and understanding of why you're in such a great spot, and how to double down on that, how to respond to God's call from that healthy place. I just signed up to do a half marathon in a couple months, which is crazy. And one of the worries I have is what I'm going to do the next day. Like, am I going to want to do another one of these 6 months from now? Like, once I get to that place of health and strength, then what? Right? So there can be anxiety in your system around that. We're awesome. Now what? Right? So we'll want to think about that and formulate questions for our people around that. There can be a lot of anxiety in a high satisfaction, high energy place. Okay. All right. Generally speaking, church by church, these are the things that drive our satisfaction and energy. Flexibility in the system, worship, open governance, church giving meaning to my life, healthy relationships here at church. Non-contributing factors to satisfaction and energy, factors that some of us think are very important but don't necessarily drive your place, are, wait for it, theological perspective, and spiritual vitality. So you may have a lot of energy and a lot of satisfaction, but not a lot of theological grounding or spiritual vitality. And so you may want to focus on those things if that's indeed the case. Okay. Next page is really interesting. Page 7. Critical success factors for improving satisfaction. I'm going to hold one up to you. This is from the booklet that I'm using. You see this page? So this is sort of a sample report on critical success factors for improving satisfaction. Basically, what this page is trying to measure is what are some things that we want to work on internally to improve our satisfaction. Okay? So those might include preaching and the relevance of preaching. We might want to develop clergy presence for needs like pastoral care. We might want to develop music or clergy bringing out the best or excellence in worship. There might be areas where we understand that that's an area that we want to develop to improve satisfaction. What does your data say?
Not that easy.
Your data says, we got this.
Yep.
Right? Or your data says, we have no idea. And that's a question that I can't answer for you right now, is which one is it? Because again, this is a beginning of a conversation, not the end. Right now, does the fact that you don't have any success factors that you need to work on, that your people are saying, we don't think that we need to work on integrity of preaching or excellence in worship or pastoral care. We don't think we need to work on those things to improve satisfaction. Is that because they really don't need to work on those things? Or is that because they don't know that they need to work on those things? My father is 78 years old and generally does not go to the doctor. Is that because he's healthy? Or is that because he's not in touch with what he needs to be focusing on at that point in his life? I don't know. I should probably talk to my dad about that, right? Right? So what my interpretation to you of this data is that you may want to have conversations. And you may want to use other data to start those conversations. Because you're going to find out later that people under 35 here have some questions and issues about music. And that didn't show up here. So you may want to ask questions, like say more about the concern you're expressing elsewhere. And just keep in the back of your mind that the person you're asking is not necessarily in touch with how strong their need is there. Does that make sense? So I looked at that and I laughed because I just thought, I think I know who you guys are a little bit. At least I have 5 years ago data. And I looked at that and I just thought, gosh, that's so St. Andrews, And what did I mean by that? What did I think? I just thought, there's just such a celebration of health here. There's not just health, but there's a celebration of it. And that's great. And it's still a question whether there might be some areas of improvement that you're just not in touch with. So that was an interesting data result. Am I going too fast for anybody?
No.
Doing okay? All right, didn't think so. Page 8. On page 8, you'll see the priorities that showed up earlier. Oh, yep. Thank you. The first 3 priorities came out in the key indicators, right? And they're still here. The top 3 are where they belong. And then it goes all the way down to 17. So this is about the future, this page. This is about what your people discern God to be calling you into as a congregation? The numbers in the right column help you see the spacing of your priorities. And you can see that some of them are pretty closely spaced. And overall, the list is pretty compact. You don't have like the later born child who came after the parents thought that they were done, you know. Generally speaking, the priorities are kind of all in a big herd. The ratings on the left show you how you compare with other churches on this priority. So you see it's kind of light, very high, average, very high. What that means is...
Oh, that's with other churches?
That's in comparison to other churches. So the need to create more opportunities for meaningful relationships. Compared to other churches, that priority is very high for St. Andrews. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So other churches would rank it very high.
No, other churches rank too.
Other churches are under you on that ranking.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. If something's toward the bottom, that could mean that it's less important as a priority, or, this is where more conversation is needed, it could be that it is important but it's already being done well. Expand the international mission of the church with financial resources and personal involvement. That's number 17. Is that because it's less important than the other 16, or is that because it's being done well? I'd say that we don't know the answer to that. You may have a hunch about it. We don't necessarily know the answer. Change or improve the music of the church to deepen our worship experience. That made it on here. Is that because it's a priority, but it's pretty low as a priority? Is it low because people are happy with the music? Or is it low because it's less important? I don't know, but we're going to look at music again, and it's going to be interesting what we see. Let's stop again for questions or comments. Carolyn?
Is this the one where we were given all of these and we got to rank them? Was this the one where they were ranked? I'm trying to remember from when I took the survey.
In the instrument?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
No, it wasn't. You're nodding your head no. Or actually, oh, okay.
What's
That's
that?
right.
I don't remember, but can you say that?
That's right, yeah, she's right, yeah. We didn't rank these. So how did these, how were these chosen?
What were you saying, Kathy?
One of the questions on the survey was ranking something, the first most important to the 7th or 8th. I think it was 8. And I thought that was like rector skills.
I think
could
you're
be
right.
wrong
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how were these?
So there's a whole bunch, I mean, they have these different modules where they're asking lots of questions about stewardship, worship,
Yeah.
and so on. And so their algorithms pulled it together in this way, you know, in terms of the responses.
So
Nikki.
I guess, so is, the mean goes from 0 to 5?
Yeah.
0, okay.
Yeah.
So 5 would be everybody gave that particular
This
question.
is a huge priority for us.
And everybody said, gave that question a 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So you can see each question is, you know, it tells you exactly which question was being asked. And then people answered 1 to 5 on how important that priority is to them. And then it's just ranking it from that.
Good.
So one of the things that I noticed and I wonder about is number 4. Develop ministries that work toward healing those broken by life circumstances. That just missed the cutoff for the top 3. And it just raises questions for me in a transformational congregation with high satisfaction and high energy, that one of the priorities that came close to the top 3 was ministries that work toward healing those broken by life circumstances. So here's questions that come up for me as I look at that data. Do people feel that they cannot speak openly about their brokenness or their disappointments in life? Is there a need there to talk more or address more some of the shadows or challenges of life in a high energy, high satisfaction place? I don't know the answer to that. The question, it sounds kind of rhetorical, like I want the answer to be yes. And maybe I do, because any questioner is biased and subjective, right? But it just makes me wonder. I see it up there, number 4, and I wonder about that. So you could have conversations after getting this data. You could have conversations with people about things like that. You could notice whether that occurs to you or work a hunch around some of these priorities. So let's take a moment. Looking at these priorities and where they sit with each other, what might be a hunch or a question that comes up for you, a question we don't know the answer to, but that we might want to explore as leaders? Anybody?
I wonder where the environmental mission,
Right. There's not a question about it.
You wonder about the environmental ministry.
Yeah.
What's your wonder?
Well, it doesn't look like it was ranked on here at all.
Uh-huh.
So
So
that's interesting to me.
yeah, so again, like what it says here is, it could be that it's not there because it's not a priority, or it could be that it's not there because it's being done well. And so there's not a lot of, gosh, we need to work on that energy. And we don't know which one it is. Yeah.
And I was
Kathy.
going to suggest that there might be a third option, which is there may not have been a question on point to the environment.
I thought I remembered.
There was one that we wrote separately, and as I
Yeah.
understand from you, Stephen, that didn't get rolled in or interpreted.
It's in there.
conjunction with
It's
these.
in there, and we're going to look at it,
Okay.
but it's in a separate module.
Right, so we're going to consider that question separately from these other priorities. So please correct me if
Yeah.
I'm wrong, but I think in the general questions in the first module of the questionnaire, there was no specific question that gave people an opportunity to respond to the importance of the church ministry about the environment or
Right.
their view of the world and those types
Yeah.
of questions.
And what about
So you will notice that number 3 priority is expand outreach ministries, providing direct services to those living on the margins of society. And thinking very broadly, environmental justice fits into that. But you probably need some diaconal leadership to make that connection for folks, that the environment is a social justice concern, that the primary people who suffer from climate change are the people who typically suffer from any other kind of social upheaval or difficulty, right? So the poor and the oppressed are poorer and oppressed further by environmental degradation than the 1%, right? Not everybody really knows that or puts that together. And you're right, like the way this survey was designed, it doesn't necessarily assess how they feel about that ministry. Because even though they put outreach up high, they don't necessarily connect environmental justice to outreach. They might. They might not. So there might need to be more conversation about that. Having said that, we're going to get to the environment in another way as a starting point for conversation.
Yeah, what jumped out at me is that the provide more opportunities for Christian education and spiritual formation is 10th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what jumps out at you about that?
It just seems low to me. I mean, having known someone here who left here because they didn't think we were scripture enough based or spiritual. I mean, I guess that's not exactly scripture based, but it is the whole tie into the,
Yeah, and again, you may
Worship.
ask the question, is it lower? Is it 10? And you'll see it's very low compared to other churches.
yeah.
Is it low because it's not a priority, or is it low because the center is here and we're rocking it?
Yeah, it's interesting.
And how do we know that? And the only way, once again, the only way to really drill down on that is to ask your respondents that question. So I'm just going to grab this as an example. You could have, I'm going to make this up right on my feet. You could have the Center at St. Andrews staff and then anyone who's interested gather in this room on a Sunday and do a quick Q&A discussion about Christian education and your hopes and dreams for the future. And this is really rough and dirty, so don't do this exactly. But and then anyone who's interested can vote with their feet and come in this room, and you can ask them that question. Is this a priority? What do you think is our future on Christian education and spiritual formation? How do you think we're doing? You asked several questions. How do you think we're doing? Where might God be calling us? You could explore why it's lower than you expected. Another thing to think about, just in a general sense, is you shouldn't be completely surprised by the data. It should confirm a lot of your hunches. If you're completely surprised, then the computer is probably giving you some other church's data, right? But you should have some surprise. You should have some, I wonder about that. So
when I saw that, what I thought was, well, of course, that makes sense because of the Center at St. Andrews and all the education we do have.
Mhm.
That's what came to me.
But you're just not, you don't know until you ask.
Right.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move forward, and we're going to interact with this data again, so don't worry. Next page, page 9. Here's where we run into some interesting stuff. On page 9, those priorities are broken down by group according to age, okay? So these are the top priorities for persons under 35, 35 to 64, and 65 plus. Here's a little activity for you. Put an asterisk next to the ones that are a priority for all three. This is going to be a moment where I get some water. We're putting an asterisk next to the ones that all three age groups have in common. Also, if you're on the videotape, you can do this too. So, fast workers, tell me, where should I put my asterisks? What priorities are common to all three age groups?
I think there's only one.
Develop and implement a comprehensive strategy to reach new people.
Yep.
Develop and implement a comprehensive strategy to reach new people. Okay.
That's it.
That is priority number 2 on the big list.
Mhm.
So it stands to reason that all 3 age groups want it. Okay, now let's do one more activity around page 92. Put the letter U, which stands for unique, next to anyone
On page 9?
on page 9,
Okay.
next to any priority that is unique to that age group.